All right. Since you've been associated with sports and you've been a coach, how do you feel? How do you think about Native American mascots being used in sports as mascots, like the Redskins, Chief Alumni, Cleveland Indians, etc.? And do you think it's media portrays it negatively, positively, and is it responsible media?
Yeah. I think first that the media is insensitive towards it in the portrayal. In extreme examples that you mentioned, like the Redskins, it's absolutely derogatory and insulting. And I would agree with the Redskins on that, and also with Cleveland Indians, simply because it's a cartoonish caricature that they use as the mascot. It's not a flattering likeness of a Native American person. So those are two examples that I think should be changed. Obviously, even though there's been a lot of attention brought to it, so far they have not changed. A lot of Native American mascots have changed, both in the NCAA with college teams and some in the pros as well. Yeah, I think mascots are important. Symbols are important. Words are important. An example of that would be the word boy. From my culture was a term of endearment, affection, that my mom would use with me as a young boy. But in an African American culture, boy is a derogatory, insulting comment. And so the same word can be interpreted differently in different cultures. Another example might be chief. Certainly some Native Americans would find that derogatory for a person to say, "Hey chief, how you doing?" And certain peoples would be insensitive to using that word, thinking perhaps that they were not being offensive, and yet they were. So I think words are important. I think symbols are important. I think we need to get them right. And I think we're in a culture now where that's changing, and that we should change the use of some mascots. Fort Lewis is a good example. We went from Raiders to Skyhawks, okay? Another example of changing in words would be gender. Women were mistreated for a long time in America, not given the right to vote or own property. And at the same time, we had to make dramatic changes in the use of gender discrimination words. And I think we've made some real progress there, So I think that the mascot issue is similar. It's past time that we change mascots, the use of mascots that might be offensive. What complicates it, of course, is that we have Native Americans who sometimes are not offended by certain mascots and others who are. So there's no real unity there, even on the Fort Lewis College mascot situation. People were divided on whether to change it or not. The Seminoles in Florida for Florida State have been active in helping to create that mascot, and they take it as a compliment. So there are always exceptions when it's done well, when it's done with the right intent. I think it can work, but there are too many that are insensitive that should be removed, updated, gotten rid of. And yeah, I do think the media contributes to it because they don't, they look for a story and what's going to lead rather than being sensitive to the issue, perhaps. What else?
What do you think, or how do you feel about the University of Illinois when they changed their mascot? Do you think that was done properly, or how do you feel about that change?
From what I know of it, I think it was. It took a little longer than it should have, but the Illini used, I believe, a chief as their mascot, and they no longer do. The problem is the NCAA had to come up with an edict that said, either change your mascot or you will not be allowed to play in NCAA championships. So I think that some of the mascots were changed only because of that, rather than for the right reasons, which were boy, you know what, this is offensive to a group of people in this country, and therefore it should be changed and brought into the modern era, okay? And the Illini, I think, was changed only after the threat of not being able to play and compete. Now, it's interesting, there are some exceptions that have been allowed. I believe North Dakota and the Sioux is one of those exceptions. Florida State Seminoles is another exception that the NCAA has allowed, but I know of only 4 or 5 or 6 of those that were allowed, and the rest of them were expected to be changed by now. And a lot did. It's a somewhat complex issue, because I can see where in some situations the mascot, the use of perhaps warriors, was truly meant to be a compliment. And we know Native American high schools that use those terms as their mascots, so they're clearly proud of the use of those. So it's a complex issue, but for the most part I think we need to view it like we did the changes we've made in gender wording. It was a raising of consciousness for a lot of people to realize that, gee, we were referring to everybody as he or his, instead of taking into consideration that may be a woman. And so I think the same thing needs to occur with the mascot situation.